of fast-moving change. We're experiencing a lot of fast-moving change in our industry and across the world. And this has resulted in, a lot of things that are happening that we're having to respond to. But let's first start with, what is a global megatrend? Next slide, please. Okay, so what is a megatrend? Well, basically a megatrend is something that represents an ongoing change in the world that has a sustained impact on everyone, like a global pandemic, for example. Everybody was affected. And the megatrends kind of define the world and the likely future that is to come. And they're defined by lots of global patterns and behavior and mobility in the environment. They have structural effects within our environment and long-term consequences around the world. They drive decisions that influence society and business and industry and economics and the environment. So the thing about a megatrend is it can point to future growth opportunities. So when you look at it and you sum it up, you can say that a megatrend has a direction, it has a momentum, and it has a causal effect. Next slide, please. So what are the megatrends that we're experiencing today? First of all, these are the megatrends that we're going to talk about in detail in each one of these categories. And we're going to start with digitalization, move to global health, and then around the circle here to finish with climate change. But in digitalization, we can go to the next slide. Digitalization is really focused on security of our data and artificial intelligence, the analysis of lots of data, augmented reality, 3D printing, and robotics. Those are all things that are possible because we have digitalized, we have the Internet of Things. So these are things that have come since we've had this megatrend. Next slide. So let's look at industrial augmented reality. Industrial augmented reality is being used today and is being implemented more and more to help with things like workforce productivity and efficiency, driving up customer satisfaction with step-by-step work instructions that are implemented on the factory floor. And they use devices to image what's supposed to happen, not what is happening, but what is supposed to happen. And that's the augmented reality and software that works in the background to help a factory worker know what to do next, to know how to pick an order next, to train somebody to do a project. No, back up, don't touch it. There you go. To look at logistics, to improve quality control, and to help people really be much more efficient at what they do. So it can improve the working operation, the operation itself, by improving the productivity, reducing scrap, rework, waste. I saw a program for a tractor company that utilizes this in their factory, where they use Google Glass to help the workers put the tractors together. And all of this is saying that they get utilizing this augmented reality digitalization technology, they're able to do their job better. And this is coming more and more into reality. In fact, I got my packaging magazine in the mail yesterday, and I saw that there were augmented reality tags on some new types of soda that people were selling. And they were putting these AR tags on the bottle itself. So it's really fascinating that this is starting to become more and more in reality and less about, sort of futuristic. It's here. So the oil and gas industry is using it to train people on, let's say, offshore oil rigs to improve worker safety and so forth, and help them handle their jobs better and more efficiently. Next slide. So other digitalization things. 3D printing has been being talked about as the third industrial revolution. And it's really, really amazing what is happening in this area. The 3D printing market is currently valued at $12.6 billion, and it's estimated to reach $35 billion by 2025, and it's growing at a phenomenal rate of 22%. Somehow this computer that's being used has sort of shifted a little bit of my slides, but anyway, I'll talk you through it. Why 3D printing? What are people doing? Well, it's allowed people to make very, very complicated parts very easily. And so it's used for prototyping, it's used for making functional parts, it's used for tooling. And it's the materials that are being used to make parts are like all these different types of plastics, excuse me, like ABS and nylon and polylactic acid, thermoplastics, photopolymers, they use UV cure, sometimes thermal cure. They can even 3D print with metals like steel, aluminum, titanium, and nickel. I was at the Oak Ridge Federal Lab a number of years ago, and I saw that they 3D printed an airplane wing. So, I mean, these things can be very huge. So what has paint got to do with this? Well, when the parts come out of these machines, they're not necessarily very smooth. In fact, they have surface roughness problems. And they want to get them as smooth as possible because as a part, it may not work if it's too rough. So they're advocating that they spray coat or dip coat or brush coat parts in order to make them smooth, because it costs too much to take the time to sand them, especially some of these more intricate parts, as I've shown here in this photograph of an epoxy coated 3D printed part. So there's a reason for having paint associated with 3D printing, even though you may not think that's the deal. So it's an interesting area. Next slide, please. In addition, we're seeing even bigger changes with 3D printing. There's a housing development in Austin, Texas, that is going to 3D print 100 homes. And so they're using concrete and they're kind of squeezing it out like a toothpaste tube, if you will. And they're making 2,000 square foot, one-story homes in 1 week with 3 people. And you talk about helping the labor shortage, that really does a trick, because if you can make a house in 1 week with 3 people, that's pretty good. And because it's concrete, of course, you're going to be using different types of coatings. Normally, when we think about our homes, we think about wood siding, we think about other types of materials, but we don't necessarily think about concrete as much, especially in the United States. So if this is going to be a trend, which I believe it will be, because it's going to help drive down the cost of homes, it's going to address a home shortage, which we have. And as they do more and more of this, the price is going to come down. And so you can assume then that we're going to be seeing more coatings that address concrete for these types of structures. So it's very neat that they're doing this, and I think that I will be following this trend and seeing where it goes. But they're doing it already, and even NASA is going to be using this technology for printing their structures when they get to whatever planet they're going to go to, or to the moon or whatever. They're going to be utilizing 3D printing to make things. So, next slide. Other types of digitalization that impact us in the paints and coatings world include on-demand computing and modeling in the laboratory, and improving our formulation capabilities. So let's take a look at ChemSpeed, for example. The ChemQuest Group doesn't advocate for any of these technologies. We're just basically making you aware of them. But ChemSpeed is a very interesting company in Switzerland that produces robotic technology that allows you to formulate many different formulas at a time, let's say 100 plus a day, and test those products. And so what you're trying to do in that mode is to do a series of experiments to find the sweet spot of a particular type of formula that gives you the exact properties you want. Because the robot is doing it instead of a person, you're freeing up your regular resources, and the robot is doing a lot more efficient and fast work than a person can do. So that's really neat. So that would not be available to us if it weren't for digitalization. And then there are other types of formulation technologies out there that are used in lab, like digital notebooks and things like that weren't used before. So this is, again, the trend will be more and more of this type of technology coming to the fore. Next slide. And robotics are entering in the drone market for painting. There's a company in Jacksonville, Florida that I know quite well. They're called Apelix. And you can see there's a couple pictures here of the drone. They were chosen by AkzoNobel for the Paint the Future contest a number of years ago. I think it was like 2019. And they are working with that company to develop and further enhance the development of painting and cleaning, as well as taking measurements. So the drone in the picture at the bottom there is actually taking a thin film measurement on that tank. So why is this important? Well, it improves worker safety because you don't have folks hanging off of painting rigs at elevated heights. And so tanks are very high in the air. Other structures that are like buildings and so forth can be painted at these elevated heights very safely, and then measurements can be taken. And when this thing takes a measurement, it takes a measurement every distance, and then what it produces is a map, and that quote unquote heat map that it produces will show you where the film is thicker and where it's thinner. And then as this tank ages, it can go back and take more measurements to tell you where it's going to fail and where you need to do touch up. So this is very important technology as well. Again, not going to happen if you don't have digitalization. Next slide. Further, we can talk about smart packaging. So everything that we produce goes in some sort of package. And so you can utilize different technologies to help you track and trace your package. So you can use near field communication technology or radio frequency ID tags to put on your packaging to show where it's going to go, especially if you couple that with blockchain. And you can actually track and trace critical packages that are, if they're critical to you. Or the other alternative here is to use QR codes to communicate to your customers. And of course, we see this now all the time. And in fact, even on my computer now, I've got a way to put a QR code on a page to track back where I was looking at something and I wanted to go find it. So you can communicate with your customer much more efficiently with a QR code that then leads them to some video or some information that you want to say about your product. So it's really, this again would not happen without digitalization. Next slide. We're going to move to global health. And of course, in the last 2 years, nothing has been more paramount in all of our minds as the pandemic. And so antiviral research, as well as the prevention of disease and antimicrobial paints and coatings, and the regulatory environment has shifted a little bit. So let's move to the next slide. So we've all had an aging population. We know our population is getting older. However, the COVID pandemic kind of put everyone's health squarely in the spotlight. And because we had a pandemic, the National Science Foundation quickly responded by accelerating approvals. They put out a call to everyone and they said, can you come up with ways to combat this virus? And so they accelerated the approvals in the regulatory process for developing antivirus technologies. So I was intimately involved in this because I review projects for the National Science Foundation. And painting and coating formulators submitted a record number of applications for funding new innovative approaches to killing viruses, as well as other bacteria. And so hopefully as these things come through the pipeline, we'll begin to see better technologies that control these entities from affecting our health. Next slide. So what are the drivers for global health? Well, of course, you go to the hospital and hopefully hope to get well, but a lot of times you get what is known as a hospital-acquired infection. And these HAIs, as they're called, they're treated every year. They insurance companies know that you can get these infections at the hospital, and they cause a lot of death in the United States. They consume a lot of valuable medical resources, financial resources. Insurance companies go nuts when they have a hospital-acquired infection. So you really want to try to limit the amount of contamination within the hospital and other areas as much as possible. So the transmission of pathogens usually happens in these medical environments, not only in hospitals and doctors' offices, but it can happen in food production facilities and daycares and in nursing homes, public spaces, gyms, and airports, cruise ship areas. I mean, everyone's trying to limit their amount of time in an airport through these critical time. But the high contact touch areas are the handrails, the door handles, the countertops, all of the medical equipment that's used. If you go get a test, they use a piece of equipment on you. How can you keep that equipment clean, and how can it prevent you from getting a transmission of an infection of some sort? Even the textiles, the bedding, and so forth, and furniture. So all of these are surfaces that can contribute to the spread of infection because it's a vector. It transmits disease. Next slide. So what are the additives that are out there? Well, there's a lot of additives, and I'm sure there's some raw material suppliers on this call that could say, oh, I have this, I have this, I have this. But the ones that are used primarily these days are quaternary ammonium compounds, which are found a lot in cleaning products these days, but they're cationic surfactants. And they're hard to formulate into paint, but it can be done. And it's a most effective way of killing bacteria, fungi, viruses, extremely effective. It's been used for years. It's the primary ingredient in Lysol, and it's cheap and effective. That's the big thing about it. And it doesn't have any persistence in the environment. And there are some, but compared to these metals, it's less persistent. So we moved to silver nanoparticles. They have an antibacterial effect as well at a certain size range. Silver nanoparticles are approved for use in the United States. They are not approved for use in Europe. So that's the thing to make to be considered. Copper is another of the antibacterial materials. It destroys these fungi by inhibiting their growth. And then there's some work that's being done with graphene. That is, I haven't seen a product yet, but I think there's some coming. There may be something out there that makes a claim, but it is not EPA registered as of yet. But graphene also has antibacterial properties. It disrupts the bacterial membrane. So these are things that can be added to paints to make them antibacterial. Next slide. And the examples here that I'm giving are two paints that are EPA registered right now. And it's important to know that if you are claimed to kill something, in the terminology in EPA languages, mitigate a pest, then you must be registered with the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States. This is a costly endeavor. It usually takes a number of years and a number of dollars to get you to this point. Two examples that I show you here are Sherwin-Williams Paint Shield, which was something that I was involved in when I was at Sherwin, and I knew about it, knew about a lot of the things that were going on with this product, but it is approved by the EPA. It contains a quaternary ammonium compound, and it is patented. On the right, you have a new product that just entered the market. It's PPG's Copper Armor, and they licensed the technology from Corning. It's called Guardian, and it is a copper glass material, and that material leaches, the copper leaches out over time, and it is also effective against bacteria and MRSA, E. coli, SARS, or the COVID. So it's a good product as well. These products will see use in these spaces that we talked about before. And I think as we go forward, we'll see more and more of these things. You do see products that make claims like they infer that they kill things, but what they're doing is relying on an exemption that's within the EPA that allows them to sort of say they protect the surface without saying it kills anything. And that's another way to go if you work in this area. So there's a couple of products that we have already, and then there's more coming. Next slide. So, nope, back up. Okay. There you go. All right. So, reshoring for economic stability. I think all of us have felt the pinch of different things that have not been delivered to us or aren't available because of the lack of supply. And our supply chain has been disrupted with lots of instability. And the next slide says it all in one short sentence, and that is out of stock. Did you click the slide? There you go. Out of stock. So we are out of stock, and people are out of stock of various things. They're coming from different countries and so forth. So why is this? What happened? What happened to create this sort of event? Next slide. So there were a couple of things. First of all, people weren't at work because of COVID. And so things weren't getting made. Our economy, even though we were in this situation, we had what was called a V-shaped recovery, where we actually recovered pretty well from this COVID event, which brought the demand right back up. But then there were shipping delays on the ocean and the rail and the trucks and so forth. And then there was this storm in Texas last February. So these 4 events contributed to the supply chain disruptions. If you go to the next slide, I'll show you. So here we are out in California, and you can see that there are ships sitting out waiting to get into port. There's a bunch of them. And so only 40% of the container ships were reaching port in time. And so there was a lot of congestion. Now, why is this backup occurring? Well, they don't have any drivers. The truck drivers that unload these containers are just not there. They're just not available. So they're anchoring until they can get the logjam broken up and get these things unloaded. So it's going to take quite a while for all of this logjam to get these products offloaded into the country. So this truck driver situation is permeating not only the port and the ports where the ships are coming in, but on the next slide, it shows you that the truck and rail shipments are also hampered. So that 20% of our chemicals are transported by rail, and so we've had problems with.
Am I the only one that can't hear, Ricky?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. I can hear
Hello?
you fine.
Okay, you can hear me? Okay, so rail car and has been disrupted as well. Liz, you might want to put your silence your screen, please. So anyway, let me get back on track here. The cost of shipping has gone up. So we went from $3.50 a mile for trucking costs to now between $7 and $15 a mile. That's huge. And so everything's going up. There's a driver shortage. They want more wages. The fuel prices have gone up, and insurance rates have gone up, and then the transportation costs have gone crazy. So all of this is sort of a catastrophic event to really contribute to this rail and ship and truck shortage. Next slide. In addition, we had a bad cold snap and storm affect the Gulf Coast last year. And a lot of chemicals come out of the Gulf Coast. So there's some pictures here of some factories, because their power went down, that they had a freezing event. Next slide. So you can see here, all of our major petrochemical centers are in the Gulf of Mexico. And so they had to basically shut down a lot of these. And because of that, 61% of our ethylene capacity, 59% of our propylene capacity was shut down. And those are the feedstocks that go into producing a ton of different types of chemicals. And as a result, we were backed up with that. So all of these 4 factors that I talked about have contributed to this shutdown. Next slide. So for reshoring for economic stability, which is the major trend that's happening right now, and it's not just happening in the United States, but it's happening all over. But the US was severely affected. So it's been reported that 80% of our manufacturers in North America are reshoring to have backup supply. And this is going to contribute about $443 billion of economic value over the next 12 months. And, you know, we've spent time, even at ChemQuest, helping clients find domestic sources of raw materials and just finding raw materials in general. But we were not served well with just-in-time and lean manufacturing processes in this case. Because if you're running a factory very lean, trying to keep your inventories low, and suddenly you don't have anything that you can bring in to replace it in terms of raw materials, then that puts you in a world of hurt. You're not producing. And so that's why we have another shortage. So everyone that I've talked to in the coatings industry is working to ensure that their domestic sources are available, that they can bring things into the United States, and that they are trying to secure their supply chains as best they can. So next slide, please. We're going to go to a different megatrend. This one to me is really fascinating, global electric vehicles or mobility, global EV mobility, because it's going to affect the coatings industry more than you think. In fact, I spent the morning in attending the DSM Advanced Materials Forum, all on electric vehicles and how their polymers are being used and changing in this environment. So you're looking at battery technology, heat management, lightweighting, and sensor technology. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Next slide. So it's been announced that every major automobile manufacturer is going to electric vehicles within the next 10 to 15 years. And this has accelerated tremendously. And in fact, it's what a guy was talking about this morning in this seminar is an unstoppable megatrend. So the battery technology development and the associated heat management of those batteries is important. You're going to see lightweighting, charging station infrastructure being developed. Transportation and delivery of goods is going to change, and it's even going to change on how you deliver your products with drone technology or last mile deliveries. There are development of electric air taxis and short distance electrically powered airplanes. So all of this comes down to batteries. It boils right down to the battery technology and all the electronics that drive the drive chains. So this creates new opportunities for us in the coatings industry, and it affects how our paints and coatings are going to be delivered in the future. Next slide. So let's look at this vehicle now, and where there used to be an engine, there's nothing there. There's going to be a lot more space in that car to put your luggage. But in the bottom is a big old battery, and then there's an electric drive train, and your tires and springs and so forth. So basically, the number of cars being sold is not going to grow, but the content per vehicle is going to grow. So what does that mean? Well, there's going to be a proliferation of all these electronic components on these cars. And there's 100 or more electronic control units on these cars than on a gas-powered car. So what does that mean? It means there's batteries, there's power conversion components, there's electric drive systems, and there's battery packs. And those battery packs are key to this whole thing. Next slide. So the coatings for electric vehicles are dependent on, keeping optimal temperatures, reducing the risk for fire, and then electrical interference. Those are the big things that have to happen for these electric batteries to work properly. And so they have there's a lot of different battery manufacturers. I saw a report yesterday on all the different ones, and they are out there producing their own needs and having their own set of things that they need. So you've got to be, when you address this area, flexible and diverse in your offerings to address the needs of each different battery manufacturer. But every battery needs fire protection, corrosion, impact protection, because obviously if you hit a car and this thing is hit, it could explode. Temperature management and electrical shielding. So the thermal management is the key. Lithium-ion batteries are full of flammable solvents, so intumescent coatings come into play. And the big thing for the batteries is dielectric coatings, which is something we generally don't think about unless you're in the electronics industry, but now you're in the automobile industry. And now you're talking about dielectric coatings. And you've got to keep things from arcing between these battery plates. So it's a whole different market than it was before, with a whole different set of needs that is coming our way very fast. Next slide. In addition, there's other types of technologies. For example, Sun Chemical has produced a pigment that is utilized that you can put, like, say, in a stop sign. And our autonomous vehicles are going to, this is the end game for the EV market, is autonomy. So that you just get in the car and tell it where you want it to go and it takes you there. So the autonomous vehicle then has to be able to talk to the road. So let's say you have stop signs that are embedded with pigments, and Sun Chemical already has these available, and they are able to be read by different types of sensor technology on the car, particularly LiDAR, that's the big one. And so you have to read the stop sign, know that the stop sign is there. And then, of course, there's automotive photonics for the road. So it's got to read the lines on the road. So you've got photonic pigments that are in there that allow you to read where the lines are and where there's, let's say, pedestrian crossways and things like that. So this is already out there. EMD Electronics is already making these technologies available for you. So again, these are things that are not necessarily here today, but they will be here. And so we need to be thinking about them now. This is how new technology comes about, by thinking ahead based on the fact that these things, we know that they're coming. Next slide, please. All right, so that finishes up the EV market. We're now going to switch focus to basically less hydrocarbons and more carbohydrates, which basically means we're reducing our dependency on fossil fuels, moving to a more bio-based raw material footprint, as well as reducing the carbon that's used in that footprint, creating more sustainable products, and reducing our pollution. Next slide. So every day, and I mean every day, there are articles that come out on replacement of petroleum-based materials with carbohydrate-based raw materials. And I think of it in chemistry terms that way, because it's basically a hydrocarbon and a carbohydrate that you're replacing with it. And everyone is concerned about the well-being of the planet. I'm certainly concerned about our planet. And we all desire safer products in our homes that don't carry hazardous warnings. And so that means that packaging and cosmetics and all the personal products that we use, cleaners and so forth, can be reformulated to contain less harmful ingredients utilizing these carbohydrate-based raw material offsets. And paints are no different. Sometimes it's difficult to get everything out of a paint that is, maybe not everything is bio-based, but you can come pretty close. And reformulating with these offsets is a trend that we will see more and more of, because consumers want it and they're becoming more green. Next slide. So there's a thing called the circular bioeconomy, and in this circle on the left here, you've got a green economy that talks about the intersection of agriculture, forestry, climate, water, and the energy industry. So all of these things intersect to create what is known as the circular bioeconomy. And on the right, you see a sustainable supply chain. And so by reducing our dependency on fossil fuels, lowering our greenhouse gas emissions, and creating these sustainable supply chains, we're able to improve our planet, basically, hopefully, as we go forward. But this sustainable supply chain here allows you to produce a product and then upcycle the material. So in other words, if you make it with a bio-based material, then perhaps you can then recycle it back into the system and upcycle it back into your product. And that would be a circular supply chain as well. So they call that a cradle to cradle approach. Next slide. So what are we talking about? I know this slide's crazy. It's got a lot of stuff on it, but it basically talks about the feedstocks for a bio-based chemicals landscape. So what are the primary feedstocks? We're talking about lignocellulose, primarily from trees, from wood, basically. You got green biomass from grasses. Then you have starches that come from wheat and corn and potatoes. We have plenty of that in the United States, and sugar as well, whether it's corn or beets. We have plenty of that. We have carbon dioxide in the air. We have organic waste that we produce every day with food waste and other types of animal waste and things like that can go through digestive processes and produce biogases and biofuels. And then we have oils that are naturally produced by seeds, like linseed oil and so forth, and also algae. People have algae farms now where they're producing oil from algae. And those raw materials can then be used and fractionated to produce different types of new raw materials that puts you in a carbohydrate-based supply chain rather than a fossil fuel-based supply chain. Next slide. So what's going on in paints and coatings? Well, you've got alkyds, epoxies, and acrylics. We all know those. But you can now make those products utilizing bio-based raw materials, as I've listed here. And, they cost more now, but as the price of fossil fuel goes up and these bio-based supply chains become more ingrained in our manufacturing processes, that price will come down. And it's been shown by research that these coating segments on the right, wall paints, flooring, furniture, lacquers, primers, deck coatings, printing inks, which are almost already there anyway, a lot of soy ink out there, textiles and structural adhesives and so forth, they all are interested in moving more towards a bio-based and plant-based group. So again, these things are coming. They're not 100% here. It's going to take a lot of work. But by getting off of fossil fuel and utilizing some more sustainable supply chains, you can see that we can slowly change over time. Next slide. So here's some examples. Things that are already in the market. PPG has a product from Sigma Coatings that is made from products from DSM. They're bio-based, and they advertise that as such. And it's also a smart coating because it's an air purifying coating. So it's a really cool technology that not only gives you bio-based content, but also purifies the air. Benjamin Moore has an offering called Natura, which is a plant-based paint. And again, you're going to start seeing more and more of these. There's a couple other examples here from Dulux, EcoPro Coat, and there's BioShield. Material from Europe, Aro is certified to be cradle to cradle, as I talked before about being able to upcycle your raw materials. Little company from Vermont, the Vermont Natural Coatings Company, has certified their raw materials bio-based from the USDA. So you can get these certifications if you meet certain criteria. So these are things that are out there already, and you'll see more and more. Next slide. Last in here is the climate change. And, we've seen a lot go on with climate change in terms of scarcity of water and flooding and water scarcity and also flooding. It doesn't make sense, but it does when you think about it. We have resources that are scarce and fires. So a lot of things are happening with the climate. Next slide. So it's produced the need for new things. What kinds of things? Well, we got increased environmental temperatures. Again, the shortage for water. We've got a lot of devastating storms. We have a lot of floods. We have a lot of wildfires. And in fact, the World Economic Forum has seen that the temperature of the planet is increasing faster than they had predicted, and it's going to go up 2 degrees Celsius, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it really is for a whole planet to go up that much. So we're really heating up fast, folks. And there are opportunities here for paints and coatings that can be used in these adverse conditions. Next slide. But don't take my word for it. If you don't believe in climate change, well, okay. The insurance industry sure does. And they have been paying out for catastrophic events, which are occurring more frequently. So as you can see in this table, we had Hurricane Andrew way back in the early 90s, and it created a catastrophic payout for the insurance companies. But as you can see, as we're going forward, more and more storms have occurred, and more payouts have occurred because of more and more damage. So they actually are quite aware of the situation, and the erosion of our coasts due to these storms, the Navy is aware of it. So there's a lot of people that are seeing the effects of these things in a way that's real and economic and not necessarily debatable. Next slide. So what are the things that we need? Well, increased durability for one. If it's hot and you've got lots of UV, so you're going to need better UV resistance. You're going to need a better product, and you're going to have to really figure out a way to increase your durability. You might have to change it to a different type of resin system and so forth. You need better water repellency if you've got rain for days coming down in the Gulf Coast area from storms. And then after that storm goes away and you've had the flood, as you can see in the picture on the top right, I mean, the mold and mildew is crazy. It's horrible. And so you've got to have better mold and mildew resistance in these coatings. And of course, because the temperatures are hotter, the application range, the temperature at which you apply a product is going to change. And so it has to be tolerant of a higher temperature. Certainly fire resistant treatments are important, particularly in California where you've got wildfires. I know globally there's been wildfires in Australia, so this is not just our problem, it's everybody's problem. And another area that's sometimes overlooked is the utility market, but I'll talk about residential roofs first. The cool roof market is going to be gangbusters, and as well as the building envelope, trying to keep the building envelope cooler with different types of technologies, whether they be reflective technologies or things like phase change materials that absorb and release heat later. But nobody feels the effects more than the utility companies. Utility companies in their switchgear and substation areas are feeling this big time because the electronics that are being used in this boxes that are seen here on the right are very sensitive. And if those suckers go down because of heat, what happens is we all go down and we have no power. And if we have no power, then things don't get done. So this is a big deal. And they have put out a call to coatings manufacturers and to other people who have technologies to look for ways to cool these boxes, because they can't put air conditioners on every one of them. They go bankrupt. So they're looking for ways to keep things cool. And this is the largest utility company in the world is located in Italy. They're called Enel. And they put out a open innovation call for technology. So this is real. It's happening. It's now. And climate change has affected these companies in a big way. And it's putting strain on our grid. So next slide. So much so putting strain on our grid that, of course, California, always the one to put the regulations out first, put out what is known as the net zero energy regulation. And what this is that all the new houses that are constructed in California right now have to produce as much energy as they consume. So what does that mean? That means that the house has to be very, very efficient. It has to have a cooler roof. It has to have low heat transfer between what's coming in and what's being out in the environment versus what's inside the house. So the envelope's got to be really tight. There's going to be a lot of solar panels, and with more solar panels comes technologies and coatings that have to go on those solar panels to keep them clean so that they operate efficiently. So that's a coating use right there. And this has been mandated, but it's in California, and it's going to be residential, commercial, and then refitted residential and refitted commercial coming as well by 2030. So this is coming, and other states have already started implementing things. New York, Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, they're all looking at this. So this thing is not just one state. It's going to hit everyone. And in Europe, they're already doing a lot of this as well. So, you know, you get benefit out of this because you have a better environment inside your home. But this is something that gives you an opportunity to address a new market, driver for cooler homes. Next slide. Boy, this one really got messed up. So reducing the greenhouse gases in our chemical supply is another area where the World Economic Forum put out a call and started an initiative called the Low Carbon Emitting Technologies Initiative. And basically, they asked these companies to join this consortium. And all of these guys are now working together, sharing information to develop new low carbon emitting technologies. So this is important for you guys because, you know, you all deal with these companies in some form or fashion over your career, and they are all working to produce these LSAT platforms. And so new products are going to come out of this, and you will see changes. So just be aware that these guys are working on reducing these greenhouse gases. Next slide. So we're through with all the megatrends. And here's my final thoughts. So everything is really fast moving. I mean, wow. Yeah, even though maybe you're quarantined, you're sitting at home, it's still moving really fast. And because megatrends can change as quickly, you have to be aware of them. And you have to be aware of how they impact you and where their opportunities are for you in the future. So you look to a megatrend as an influencer and a way to say, well, this could be a disruptive innovation if we could put this together, because we know this is coming, like electronic vehicles. If I can work with a new battery manufacturer and come up with a way to help them, then that would be a new thing for us and a new thing for them, and it could be disruptive. So you have to be aware of all these changes that are coming up with these trends, and it helps you stay ahead and stay ahead of your competition, and help the market stay ahead as well by addressing the needs of the customer. So these things were not there before necessarily. So that's why I'm saying if you're aware of them now, and you can start to really investigate where the needs lie, then you can actually address some innovation that might be needed by your customers and make them very happy. The other thing is working collaboratively, and that's what I do at ChemQuest, is I help people work in a collaborative way. And you can get to market faster if you got two good heads rather than one that has some resources. If you both have good resources, maybe you can get to market faster. So we help put folks together to do that. So think in terms of collaboration, think in terms of Megatrend as an influencer, and think of ways to, you know, put new products on the market that address some new things that weren't there before. Next slide, please. So just to talk to you a little bit about who we are at ChemQuest. And what I do, as she said when she introduced me, I'm the Vice President of Collaborative Innovation, and we're a global strategy company, and we work in the area of specialty chemicals. So we started in '76, and we got about 130 people on our staff. Been around, you know, really long time with the staff in terms of folks like myself who've been in business, who've basically working on second careers. and have a lot of deep knowledge and experience in the industry, in a lot of different industries. And our customers and clients, I would say clients mostly, are raw material suppliers who need help with evaluating raw materials, perhaps a new raw material or something that they're bringing from a different country into this country. Manufacturers of formulated products, paint companies, adhesive companies, and so forth. And then other folks in the institutional, financial institutions, trade organizations look to us for our knowledge of the markets. We work with a lot of private equity folks. So there's a lot of those kind of people in our day-to-day work as well. And next slide, please. So we have these 4 pillars of services. As I said, from strategy, trying to help you figure out what to do. We have folks who are expert in manufacturing who can help basically streamline manufacturing processes, or if you've bought somebody, for example, and how to integrate them in, we're really good at that. And then, of course, we have the ChemQuest Technology Institute, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then we just recently bought the Powder Coatings Institute in Columbus. And so we have a laboratory. So we're not just we just don't advise people. We can actually make things and test things and so forth. We also do a lot of work with mergers, acquisitions, and divestors. So there's a lot of work that I have been personally worked on in the past, acquisitions, for example, and so forth. So we do a lot of that financial evaluation and due diligence. Next slide. So basically, the ChemQuest Technology Institute, pictured here, is in Virginia, which is near me. I'm in Charlottesville. And we have a laboratory that gives you the opportunity to formulate and design products, make independent evaluations, do applications with application equipment that is industrial application equipment, not just bench stuff. And we teach the Fraunhofer adhesive course. So, I mean, we do a lot there, and it's a very busy place. So I just wanted to make you aware of that, of those services, and I work directly with everybody in the organization, but we try to bring collaborative innovation into our thinking in every opportunity for people to work together. So last slide, please. So I thank you very much for your time and attention. I'm gonna take questions from everybody if you guys would want to do that. Also, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Tell me how you enjoyed the presentation, or if you hated it, or if I missed something, or whatever. And you guys in Chicago aren't shy, I know that. So please, thanks so much for your attention. I hope this has been very informative for you. I hope the megatrends in the future is kind to you, and that you come up with some great innovations. Thanks.
Thank you, Vicki. We didn't see any questions in the chat, so if anybody has anything to add, please speak up.
All right.
Okay. Well, I thank you very much, Vicki. I thought it was a great presentation and learned a lot of food for thought for sure. A lot of innovative and interesting stuff going on, and very timely, obviously. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone for spending your lunch with us.
Thanks, everybody. Have a nice Thanksgiving.